the rest of the world can too. I'm Alison Reddy from the University of Illinois, and first of all, I want to thank Anita for being our local host and organizing all the things on the ground here, because we basically just showed up, had some jet lag, and then everything was taken care of. So that's just awesome. I also noted when Don and I went to the gardens that Anthony, Don, and I all traveled about equidistance to be here, about 12,000 kilometers each. So we're just going to keep meeting here because clearly it's the center of where we should be. And that way we all have to travel the same distance. This is our beautiful mathematics building in the background. We're actually a very large department, so we take up 3 buildings, but this is the nice one. So it's the one that ends up in the slide. So just a little bit about me. I'm going to be talking twice today and then in the other sessions as well, but so you can understand how I grounded in my framework and how I think about things. So I am the director of the Math Assessment Program on my campus, and that's a role that I created. And so I didn't take over someone's job. I created this space. Math placement on our campus in terms of how you accessed a course was really a choose your own adventure story. And sometimes it was your parents chose your adventure story. And usually when you're choosing your own adventure, coming into higher education, that's often a nightmare. And so I was trying to step back from that and really help students make sure don't go swimming in the pool if you don't know how to swim. We want to make sure students really have their mathematical background ready to be in that class. I'm also the quantitative reasoning coordinator, which means that I'm responsible for the instructors, the curriculum for the first and second year math course within our department.
I'm just going to take away this.
Okay. And she's trying to take me away from me.
Just that little, there's a audio.
Yeah, and I see. No. And I teach. So that's very important. I teach large lectures of first year students. On our campus, a large lecture is like 300 students per section. And so I have this viewpoint from the classroom, which really helps frame my view of how I think about what's happening in the curriculum and what's happening in terms of how we assess students globally on our campus. I do a lot of committee work on my campus and also for the state of Illinois. And those are sometimes at odds with each other, but that's just really what happens. And so really, I've spent my entire professional career, other than that very short period of where I thought I was going to do research in pure math, focusing on how students transition to higher education and how we can have that be successful. And so that's my happy spot in terms of what I did. So we have this growing role of technology in higher education, and I feel like tomorrow is going to be different than today. And so we're really thinking about how does this affect how we teach, how students learn, and how we assess students. So we're really thinking about using technology for good and not for evil. So we really want to make sure that we're using this in a positive way to think about what students are doing. I thought that like the pandemic really changed what we were doing with teaching, but I feel like this is going to have a much greater impact on what we're doing. And so we want to then be using adaptive testing because it allows us to really have a much better understanding of a student's knowledge state. And so I think about mathematics as a level of maturity. If we as a department tried to agree on some number, 100, 1,000 concepts that we wanted to guarantee our students knew, we would still be arguing about what those concepts are, 10 years later. We would never come to agreement. And so we really want to think about what does it mean to have mathematical maturity. You might not have seen all these things that we want you to understand and know as you enter higher education, but could you figure it out if it was presented in front of you? So it's not a guarantee of these topics, but just sort of a sense that you could do it if need be. And so we also know from a lot of research that's been done in the US and probably other places too, that current mathematical knowledge, not a surprise, really predicts success in that first math course. So if you're well prepared, you're much more likely to be successful. And there's been a lot of research that success in that first math course is a very strong predictor of degree attainment. And so in that sense, that first course for students coming to campus, that first semester is very high stakes. And so we want to maybe try and lessen the high stakes of that so that they have a better chance of being successful and continuing. Plus the fact that if you're not successful in that first course, you tend then to switch majors. I don't know what it is in the South Africa or in Australia or in Ireland, but about half our students switch majors in the US. And a lot of that has to do with non-success in a gateway class, which tends to be mathematics. And so we don't want to be a barrier. We want to help students go forward. Okay, so really the goal of using adaptive testing, and this is when students come to campus, is to really have an accurate measure of their mathematical maturity. What is their knowledge state? Are you going to try and come squeeze this thing off of here?
You keep talking.
There's things we can do. So we really want to have this adaptive testing, tell us what students know so that we can match them with the proper course. Because in our institutions in the US, students don't all hit university at the same course. There's many, many courses in the curriculum they might enter with. So we really want that adaptive testing to have a current knowledge map of where a student is and how they can be successful. And then when we do that, in terms of we can have students be engaged, active responsibility, here's your current knowledge. If that's not where you thought you were or not where you want to be, do something about it. So either go back and engage in those topics that you didn't know, and let us provide you with a learning module that's primed by that initial assessment, because it is adaptive. Because if we just say, I'm sorry, you're not prepared, pick up your secondary school textbook and just do all the odd exercises in every single section. I mean, no one's going to do that. That sort of seems to be what we used to do. And now we can say, here's where's your week. Here's where you need to improve your preparation, and give them very good direction on what to do. When we have an adaptive testing, in terms of that, when we get this immediate feedback, students can fill in those gaps. I said spackle. What do you call it here?
No.
I put it on the side.
Yes, the spackle got me.
Yeah.
I remember we spoke about it. Well, we use Gradescope, Alex. It's not.
Okay. So I think about my adaptive testing in this personalized remediation for students to get back in is spackle. That's like if you have all the cracks and you're repainting your walls.
Polyfiller.
Okay, polyfiller. Just something to go in, because every student comes in with different little holes and gaps and cracks, even if they had the same curriculum. And it's way worse if they didn't all have the same curriculum. So I can't solve that for my 600 students in the fall. I wish that I could. So I need that adaptive mechanism in the background to help me help them pick up those things that they just didn't learn as well or synthesize or didn't understand how they were connected. And so with all of this, a key benefit is that students are matched to a course that matches their true preparation. And if you are prepared for that class, not surprisingly, you're much more likely to be successful. Therefore, we get higher retention rates and higher progression rates. So when we switched over to having a sort of strict placement and adaptive testing, not only did we have higher retention rates, we had higher enrollments in subsequent semesters, and then improved graduation rates in the long term. So all very positive. So policy development. So I am a firm believer that no matter how awesome your mechanism is, your adaptive test, your diagnostic, it will not make one difference on your campus unless you have a set of policies that support that. So is it required? And if it's required, who's it required, to all students or students in this major? Are they required to follow the directive? If it says you're ready for this class, can they overrule that? Or someone can overrule it, who is that? So you really have to have a strong policy, and it has to be backed by somebody who carries some weight on campus so that students can't circumvent it. And when you have a strong policy like that, you have a very consistent standard. We don't have a national test in the US. And so having this adaptive testing, this diagnostic, and a policy that supports it means that every single student enters that class by the same standard. And that really helps. And it also means it's the person at the front of the room, because everyone had to take this diagnostic within 4 months of entering the course. I can say, I know that all of you can do this, because they just had to prove that they could to be in this class. decades ago when I started my career, I would enter the room and say, I have no idea what any of you can do. And now I know that we all have a common background. They all demonstrate this level of maturity. We are ready to move forward. So I'm not spending day one or week one, or sometimes, help me, 2 weeks, saying this is what you should have known to be in this class. Day one is day one. And so it gives us more time in the curriculum to really help students. It really reduces advisor sort of support and institutional burden. When students didn't know, well, I think I took this class in high school. I think I learned this material. They really have no idea. We were trying to spend a lot of time sorting that out. And then back to the choose your own adventure story, enroll in whatever math class you think is going to be good. This adaptive testing and then the policy that supports it directs the majority of the students to the right class, and that's sorted. Therefore, advisors can really focus on the students who have more complex needs. And there are some students who really need more advising support, but probably over 80% of our students, you have this score, you go to that class, they're good to go. And so that's really beneficial to our institution. And so really the key benefit is we wanted a data-driven, not a, I think this is a good idea, to really have students put into courses using that data, not only looking at student success, but also that gives feedback about what's in our classes. So I will come to that curriculum thing in a little bit, but we were making lots of decisions on our campus in terms of who takes what class, what's in each class, based on history or gut feeling and not on data. And so when you have a diagnostic and it's adapted and everyone's taking it, we have a very large institution incoming population, you're getting a lot of good information that then not only benefits the students, but makes the department and the institution better as a whole. So all a good thing. So I will tell you a little bit about the US and my institution in general, and this will play more to my afternoon talk. So the University of Illinois is a top-rated institution in our country, and it's very large. We have over 56,000 students on campus, so that's really exciting. Our incoming class of first-year students is over 8,000, plus about another 2,000 transfer students. We have over 4,000 faculty on campus, and so it's massive. It's really, really big. And so we have over 100 PhD programs, and on average, we spend over $750 million in research. So research is the driver on our campus, but I am proud and happy to be in a math department because there's no way around it. We are a service department. We service all other units on campus. And we have had chairs and people in the administration, not only the department, but the college, that really support teaching and helping students be successful. And that's not true at all research institutions. So I'm happy for that. As Anita touched upon, we have no national curriculum or national assessments in the US. We have no statewide curriculum or statewide assessments in the US. And it is so independent by school that you could transfer schools in the same town and be totally off track mathematically in the same middle of the year, because it's really school dependent. It's not even necessarily the same within a school district. So independence sometimes sounds like a good idea, but in this context, it's a disaster, because then students transition to higher education. Some students are coming in at an algebra level, like below calculus algebra, and some kiddos are coming in at differential equations, and they're all the same age. And so it's very, very different where they went to school. And very sadly, the secondary mathematics curriculum varies wildly depending on the wealth of the town. And so if you're from a wealthy community, you have really good schools, you have access to really good teachers. The curriculum will go 2 or 3 years beyond that of a lower served school. And so when we're thinking about access and equity for students coming to higher education, students are coming in from our poorer communities, our rural communities, 2 to 3 years behind their peers. And it's not only what's happening in the classroom, but we are pay to play sort of state and country in terms of extracurriculars that occur after school. And so also in the wealthier communities, students have access to math camps, robotics, quiz bowl, all these things where they are synthesizing the advanced curriculum they're exposed to during the day and engaging with other adults. And so they have those opportunities, and those students are working to really be a part of that, where students from inner city and rural communities are not having those same opportunities. And so the disparity that you see when students come to campus is very, very widespread, and that is quite unfortunate. Okay. And hard to solve. So just briefly, because I'll talk about this later, I implemented the U of I assessment program back in, 2007. It was not a popular idea. If it hadn't been successful, I'd be talking to, well, not at all today, and if so, from another institution. It was wildly controversial that I wanted to assess students for their mathematical preparation. This seems like a really simple idea, and boy, were people mad. And I mean like really mad. And so, really mad. We'll just leave it at that. Since I got the whisper, I hope it goes well, otherwise you'll be looking for another job. So since that point in time, we've had over 180,000 students go through the assessment. And when you're assessing students mathematically on campus, it has a lava flow. So after everyone got over being pissed off at me, they said I was being punitive. They started to realize if math is doing a better job, making sure their students are well prepared, oh my gosh, we're seeing the benefits in biology and engineering, chemistry, and even surprising things like political science, like across the board, it had a positive effect. And so eventually people said, oh, you did something good, but it took a while. So we were the first institution to implement this type of program. So this is pretty early on in adaptive technology, 2007. And so when I was being yelled at for doing something horrible, I was asked, who else is doing this? And I said, no one. And they said, well, what data or anything do you have that this is going to work? And I had nothing. So it was a little high stakes, but since that point in time, over 450 institutions in the US have copied our model to great success. And so we did something good, and our institution claimed that we did something wonderful, and I'm still there. So the assessment is required for all incoming students and transfer students. So it's post-admissions. So it's not admissions assessment. It happens afterwards, and that's really important. So everybody takes it because it's good advising information, and also because the high school varies so wildly in our country that you could be at the top of your class and be very weak mathematically, depending where you went to school. You could be in the middle of your class and be very high mathematically, depending where you went to school. Or you could have courses on your secondary school transcript that don't align at all with anything that you know. So I have a non-trivial number of students who have calculus on their high school transcript and are functioning in arithmetic and algebra level. And so and they don't know. That's the really hard part, is they don't know that they didn't have that material because it's just been sort of shifted along for so long. And so it's required of everyone. And then if you want to take in just a small section of classes, because this is where we had very high non-success rates, Calc 1, pre-calc, college algebra, business calc. So if you're coming into Calc 2 or above, generally you're good to go. But for the students that are coming in at these entry-level courses, that's where we were having very high DFW rates. And for example, in college algebra, if you weren't successful that first semester, you had a 50% chance of graduating from institution. And that first math class should not be a coin toss on whether or not you get a degree. And so from my perspective, when I'm doing high stakes, but I want to remove the high stakes from the students. Oh gosh, I could go faster. Okay, our goals. I'm going to read through these a little bit quicker. I'm looking at the time. So using adaptive testing, what we really want to do is assess all incoming students. And we want that to happen early on so we could understand what their mathematical maturity and knowledge was. We really want to improve that transition from secondary school to higher ed. As I think I said to Anita the other day, it seemed like we were bringing all of our students to one side of the river with this massively strong current, and only those who could swim across by themselves sort of succeeded. So, how do we sort of raft everyone across, with a lifeboat or something to help them be successful? That's what we were trying to do. We need to identify students who needed more support and then figure out what those supports were going to be. And when you're doing these changes by assessing everybody, you have to develop policies such that it works for your institution. So I'm all about institutional fit. We have lots of things in common, but it has to fit our institution, our student body, and looking at where can we make structural change? Like, how can we really make things different? And sometimes people look at me like I'm trying to move the building an inch to the left. And, you're like, no, I need to push back. We're trying to change the student experience, but structural change is important. We need to have an idea of what drives that and how it's going to make a difference. So we wanted to create classes by design and not default. The pandemic certainly changed that. But when I was hired over 2 decades ago, the classes were the way they were because that's the way they'd always been. And no one was questioning it. Here's the syllabus. It's on that blue mimeograph paper. For those who are of my age, they'll know what I'm talking about. Here's the textbook, and that's what you do. And there was no question about that. And that's really not how we should be designing our courses. Well, that's the way it was. So creating by design. And we really need to advise students holistically. We need to give them more information about what they're prepared to do, what the options are. Students often come to campus, at least in the States, they imagine there's like 5 majors. They can be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. Like, their breadth of what's possible is very limited. And we have over 100, majors and minors on campus. So how do we look at their mathematical, their quantitative preparation, help them be successful, and help them imagine something more for themselves to be successful? So we really want to increase success rates. That was really the initial goal. If you get in trouble in a math class, at least in my campus early on, you're usually then just really in trouble. And you don't know you're in trouble until the first exam. And for us, that's 4 to 5 weeks into the semester. So you're 5 weeks on campus, you're just getting used to your roommate, you just failed a class, and what are you going to do now? It's really problematic. And you're a kid by all intents and purposes. And conduct research. This is one of the things that's most important to me because I'm asking my institution to spend money. I'm asking my students to spend time doing something. And if I don't have a clear goal of what I'm trying to accomplish, an evaluation plan to see if I'm accomplishing that goal, and a way to measure that, then I'm not doing the right thing. I need to conduct research all the time for best practices and effectiveness, and understand how to make changes when changes are necessary. So I'm a big believer in conducting research. Okay, challenges, some of many. Learning loss. We used to complain about summer learning loss, right? When kids went on vacation. I mean, the pandemic put that in a whole new perspective. And it's definitely very difficult right now because of where students were interrupted in their curriculum during the pandemic tended to be algebra. So we're actually seeing more problems now than we were in the past few years. And so learning loss is a huge problem. Okay, inequities in learning opportunities and resources. Massive problem in the US, and I imagine it's a big problem here as well, in terms of what students have access to prior to coming into higher education. Yes. Oh, okay, I'm going. Unpredictable enrollments. Are they going to come to our campus? Are they going to go to another? What math class are they going to take or not take? Really hard to make those decisions. And then we also curricular design and delivery. Are we doing it like we used to do it? Are we doing it online like we did during the pandemic? Are we now recovering from generative AI? And what can I ask that a student can't answer by just typing it in? This is problematic. Okay. Overuse of technology leads to seeking versus solving behaviors. My students, the last thing they're going to do is attempt to solve something. That is last resort. They are seeking if they can find that answer first. So I have to be mindful of that. So I grew up being a solver. Maybe I would look at something in the back of the book, but this is very different. And I have to be aware of that all the time. The students themselves, right? I mean, they have changed and they will continue to change. So they are challenged. And logistics of changing curriculum, implementing a diagnostic. In terms of money, logistics, everything is complicated. I want to make sure I don't get to some successes. So adaptive technology can really improve and make a difference in terms of assessment and learning for students, and it can make it more accessible. So we really see that positive benefit there. Determination who will be successful in a math class. Instead of that choose your inventor story, here's your mathematical maturity. I understand your knowledge state. These courses would be a good fit for you. And I can guarantee that you have an over 80% chance of passing. Okay, I couldn't do that before. And that's really important and helpful for students. Increased enrollments and pass rates, increased retention and progression. My provost told me every 1% increase in retention, which is about 80 students, that's another additional $1 million in revenue to the institution. Retention is big money. We've paid to get them to campus. We've put them in that class. If we lose them, $1 million just walked out the door. 1%, 1 million, big money. Therefore, they pay for things. That granular information on students' knowledge helps us really think about what do we need to do to our curriculum? What topics are in the supports? Where might students get in trouble? So from the diagnostic test, I get lots of information, which is what I will address later today, to then think about what's in the curriculum, what's in the supports, what keeps a student from passing or failing. Very important. And using the data to rethink what we teach in our classes. Why am I teaching this topic when 90% of my students has already mastered it? And why am I not teaching this topic when no one seems to understand it and it's critical for the next class? So how can I get a better understanding using data, what they know, and looking at the curriculum, what makes sense at this point in time? Okay, I'm going to go through my characteristics, and then I think we might miss the last slide. If you're going to use an adaptive diagnostic, you have to think about a lot of things. Here's I tried to do 10, but 13. You actually need a valid and reliable assessment mechanism. I know that seems like really obvious, but there's a lot of technology out there that's not very good. So unless it's reliable and valid, it's not going to work. So the mechanism matters. You need a collection of policies. Back to what I said, you have a great test, but unless you have some way of enforcing it and using it in a way that makes sense, it doesn't matter if the mechanism's good or bad. You have to enforce those policies. So somebody has to have the final word, and hopefully someone taller than I and preferably in a suit. Okay, stakeholder buy-in. And who are the stakeholders? Is it the math department? Is it the provost? Is it the chancellor? Is it the advisors? Is it the tech people on campus? Really understanding the registrar, who are the stakeholders and how do I get them involved? Critical. Good experimental design for data analysis. If I can't make sure that I'm doing a good job, then that's not going to work. So I need to make sure that the data is there so we have a good design. Strong association with student course outcomes. If the mechanism is not predictive of student success, then either the mechanism is asking the wrong questions or it's just not serving my needs. So there should really be a strong association, and it should be stable. It shouldn't be like, well, it worked this semester. You know, I have 17 years of stability. So you really want to see that stability from semester to semester. I mean, not necessarily 17 years, but, you know, within reason. Comprehensive topic coverage. Otherwise, your population's too narrow in terms of courses. Awareness of everyone on campus. That's the one that people like to think about. Advisors, instructors, students, they need to know that this exists. Effective messaging, targeted support and learning options for remediation. Low stakes. We have lots of high stakes assessments in the US. What course is the right class for you should not be palm sweating high stakes. I want to know your mathematical knowledge base. And if you didn't perform where you think you should have, engage in the learning module that's primed to help you fill in those little things that you forgot. and come back and take it again. Okay, I want to help you be successful. Okay, I don't want to give you a heart attack. That's very important. And it should be close to course start date. Mathematical knowledge dissipates. If it's not close, it's not going to give us the results that we wanted. Okay. Oh, food for thought. One last thing, Nia standing up. Better is good. Implement change now. Early in my career, I was so caught up in that it had to be the best or it had to be perfect that I paralyzed myself and didn't get much accomplished. Better is good. And then after better, you can get a little bit better. But just, any improvement is an improvement. It doesn't have to be that level. Start with better. And that's, I think, is for younger people, the most important thing to learn. Okay, I'll stop there.